Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. I'm not usually the type to go for online dating. My friends always met people at bars, or through mutual friends, the normal stuff. But I was in a rut, working the same dead-end job at the hardware store, coming home to an empty apartment, scrolling through the same social media feeds. I needed a change. So Hinge it was. I filled out my profile, picked some decent pictures, and started swiping. Most of the profiles were, well, let's just say they weren't exactly what I was looking for. Then I saw hers. Her name was Sarah. She had this amazing smile, like the kind that could light up a whole room. Her profile said she was a photographer, loved hiking, and was looking for someone who was adventurous and kind. Seemed perfect, right? Too perfect, maybe. But I swiped right anyway. We matched. We started talking, and it was easy. Like we'd known each other forever. We texted constantly, sharing dumb jokes, talking about our dreams, and even our fears. She was funny, smart, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. It was actually kind of freaking me out how well we clicked. After a week of texting, we decided to meet up. She suggested this little coffee shop downtown, the one with the funky art on the walls and the really strong espresso. I was nervous, like stomach churning, sweaty palms nervous. I hadn't felt this way about someone in well ever. When I saw her, I almost choked. She was even more beautiful in person. Her eyes were this crazy shade of green, and she had this laugh that made my heart do flips. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. The coffee shop closed, and we didn't even realize it. We started seeing each other every day after that. Movies, dinner, walks in the park, even just hanging out at my apartment, watching old movies, and eating pizza. It was like a dream. I was actually happy, truly happy, for the first time in a long time. But then things started to get weird. It started subtly. Little things, like Sarah knowing things about me that I hadn't told her. She'd mentioned something I'd said in passing weeks ago, or she'd know exactly what I was thinking before I even said it. It was like she was inside my head. I chalked it up to her just being really observant, a good listener. But it still made me uneasy. Then there were the phone calls. I'd get calls in the middle of the night, just silence on the other end. When I checked the caller ID, it would say unknown number. I asked Sarah if she was calling me, playing some kind of prank, but she swore it wasn't her. She even seemed genuinely concerned. Things escalated. One night, I woke up to find Sarah standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me. The room was dark, and her face was hidden in shadows. I asked her what she was doing, and she just said, "I was watching you sleep." It sent a chill down my spine. I tried to brush it off, told myself she was just being quirky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Then I started having nightmares. Vivid, terrifying nightmares where Sarah was different. She wasn't the sweet, funny girl I knew. She was something else, something dark and twisted. In the dreams, she would whisper things to me, things I couldn't quite understand, but that filled me with dread. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just dismissed it as stress. She told me I was working too hard, that I needed to relax. But I knew it was more than that. I could feel it in my gut. One day, I decided to do some digging. I know, it sounds crazy, but I had to know what was going on. I started by searching her name online. Nothing. No social media profiles, no pictures, no mention of her anywhere. It was like she didn't exist before she met me. That's when I really started to panic. I went to her apartment. She lived in this old, run-down building on the outskirts of town, the kind of place you see in horror movies. I knocked on her door, but no one answered. I tried the handle, and to my surprise, it was unlocked. I stepped inside. The apartment was dark and dusty. There was a strange smell in the air, like old flowers and something metallic. I walked through the living room, into the bedroom, and that's when I saw it. On the wall, there were pictures. Hundreds of pictures. Pictures of me. Me sleeping, Me eating, me walking down the street. Pictures taken without my knowledge. It was like she'd been stalking me for months, maybe even years. I backed away slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. I had to get out of there. As I turned to leave, I saw something on the nightstand. A small leather-bound book. I hesitated for a moment, then picked it up. It was a diary. I opened it and started to read. The diary was filled with Sarah's handwriting, but it wasn't the Sarah I knew. It was the Sarah from my nightmares. The dark, twisted Sarah. She wrote about me, about how she'd been watching me for years, waiting for the right moment to make me hers. She wrote about how she'd manipulated me, how she'd made me fall in love with her. And then I read something that made my blood run cold. She wrote about a ritual that would bind us together forever, a ritual that required a sacrifice. I slammed the diary shut and ran out of the apartment. I didn't stop running until I was back at my place, locked inside, shaking like a leaf. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the door, waiting for her to come. The next morning, I went to the police. I told them everything, about Sarah, about the diary, about the pictures. They listened patiently, but I could tell they didn't believe me. They said I was probably just stressed, that I needed to get some rest. They said they'd look into it, but I knew they wouldn't. I was on my own. I decided to leave town. I packed my bags, quit my job, and drove as far away as I could. I changed my name, got a new phone, and started a new life. For a while, I thought I was safe. I thought I'd escaped. But then I started seeing her. Not in person, but in the reflections. In the windows, in the mirrors, in the puddles on the street. Just a glimpse, a fleeting image of her face. Her eyes, that crazy shade of green, staring back at me. I know she's still out there. I know she's still watching me. And I know that one day, she'll find me. I even caught her on Hinge recently. I saw the profile, it was her, but the name said Janet. And the truly scary part? The bio said she was looking for someone who's lonely and wants to feel loved. Okay, so, something seriously messed up happened to me recently, and I kinda need to get it off my chest. It's the kind of thing that makes you question everything you thought you knew about. Well, everything. I'm not usually one for sharing personal stuff, especially not stuff this weird, but I'm hoping that maybe putting it into words will somehow make it feel less like a crazy dream. Here goes nothing. It all started with Hinge. Yeah, I know, super original. I'd been swiping on and off for months, mostly just killing time when I was bored. You know how it is. The usual parade of gym selfies and guys holding fish. Then, I matched with this dude named Liam. His profile was different. Not in a try-hard way, but just subdued. He had a couple of candid shots. One of him reading in a park, another of him tinkering with a vintage motorcycle. No cheesy quotes or shirtless pics. He just seemed normal. Interesting, even. We started chatting, and he was actually a good conversationalist. He didn't bombard me with pickup lines or immediately ask me to hang out. We talked about books, movies, music, stuff I actually cared about. After a week or so of chatting, he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant. I've had my fair share of dating app disasters, but something about Liam felt safe. I agreed to meet him at this little coffee shop downtown. The coffee shop was tucked away on a side street, all brick walls and exposed pipes. The kind of place that plays indie music at a reasonable volume. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at a table near the window. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a little better in person. He had this kind of quiet intensity about him, like he was always thinking about something deeper than what was right in front of him. The date went surprisingly well. We talked for hours, about everything and nothing. He was genuinely interested in what I had to say, and he actually listened. It was refreshing. We even had a few laughs. By the end of the night, I was actually feeling optimistic about dating for the first time in a long time. We saw each other a few more times after that. He took me to this cool art gallery. We went for a hike in the woods, and we even cooked dinner together at my place one night. Everything was going great, almost too great. Then, things started to get weird. Subtle at first, barely noticeable. He started asking me strange questions about my dreams, my fears, my earliest memories. Not in a creepy way, but in a way that felt probing. He'd stare at me intently when I answered, like he was trying to see something hidden beneath the surface. I started having trouble sleeping. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, feeling like I was being watched. I'd hear noises in my apartment that I couldn't explain, creaks and groans that sounded like someone was moving around inside the walls. One night, I woke up to find Liam standing over my bed. He was just staring at me, his eyes wide and unblinking. I screamed, and he jumped back, startled. He apologized profusely, saying he'd had a nightmare and didn't know where he was. I was freaked out, but I tried to play it cool. I told him it was okay, but he needed to leave. After that, I started avoiding him. I made excuses, told him I was busy, but he kept calling, kept texting. He'd show up at my apartment unannounced, waiting outside my door. I started to feel like I was being hunted. One day, he sent me a text saying he needed to talk to me, that it was urgent. I ignored it. Later that night, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered it. It was Liam. His voice was strained, almost frantic. He said he knew what was happening to me, that he could help me. He said I was in danger. I told him to leave me alone, that I was calling the police. He hung up. I spent the next few days living in a state of constant anxiety. I changed my locks, installed a security system, and told my friends what was going on. They thought I was overreacting, but they supported me nonetheless. Then I got another call. This time, it was from the police. They said they needed me to come down to the station. They had found Liam's body. He had been found in his apartment, an apparent suicide. There was a note. It was addressed to me. I went to the police station, my heart pounding in my chest. They showed me the note. It was rambling, incoherent. He wrote about dreams, about fears, about things I couldn't understand. He wrote about me, about how I was the key. The police said he was mentally unstable, that he had a history of depression. They said I shouldn't blame myself, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was somehow responsible. I went back to my apartment, numb. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall. Then I noticed something. A small, folded piece of paper tucked under my coffee table. I hadn't seen it before. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a picture of me. But it wasn't a picture I had ever taken. It was a picture of me sleeping, taken from directly above my bed. On the back of the picture, there was a single word written in shaky handwriting. Soon. I called the police again, showed them the picture. They took it as evidence, said they would investigate. But I knew they didn't believe me. They thought I was just a grieving ex-girlfriend, seeing things that weren't there. I didn't sleep at all that night. I stayed up, watching the shadows dance on my walls. I kept hearing noises, creaks and groans that sounded like someone was moving around inside my apartment. The next morning, I decided I couldn't stay there anymore. I packed a bag and left, without telling anyone where I was going. I just needed to get away, to clear my head. I drove for hours, until I reached this small town in the middle of nowhere. I checked into a motel, hoping to get some sleep, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. That night, I had a dream. A vivid, terrifying dream. I was back in my apartment, lying in my bed. I could hear someone moving around in the darkness. I tried to scream, but I couldn't make a sound. Then I saw him, Liam, standing over my bed, his eyes wide and unblinking. He reached out his hand, and I woke up screaming. I sat up in bed, covered in sweat. I looked around the room, but I was alone. Or so I thought. Then I saw it. A small, folded piece of paper on the nightstand. I picked it up and unfolded it. It was a picture of me. But it wasn't a picture I had ever taken. It was a picture of me sleeping, taken from directly above my bed, in the motel room. On the back of the picture, there was a single word written in shaky handwriting. Here. Turns out, Liam wasn't a depressed guy I met on a dating app. Liam was my long-lost twin brother given up for adoption, obsessed with me since he found me online, and desperate to reunite, in the creepiest way possible. He didn't kill himself. He faked it, and now he knows where I am. Okay, so, you know how everyone's always talking about dating apps? Like, oh, it's the only way to meet people these days. Yeah, well, let me tell you my Hinge horror story. isn't about some dude who lied about his height or kept trying to send me weird pics. It's way, way worse. It messed with my head in a way I still don't fully understand. This happened last summer, and I'm still trying to unpack it. I was bored, okay? Summer after graduating high school, before heading off to community college. All my friends were either working their butts off or on some exotic vacation with their families. I was stuck in my tiny, suffocating hometown, scrolling through TikTok until my eyes burned. That's when I caved and downloaded Hinge. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to hang out with, maybe catch a movie. I set up my profile, swiped a bunch, and actually got a few matches. Most were duds, guys who couldn't hold a conversation or were clearly just looking for a hookup. Then I matched with him. His name was Alex. He was cute, in a sort of brooding, artsy way. Dark hair, intense eyes, a profile full of pictures of him hiking and playing guitar. He seemed normal. We started chatting, and he was actually really interesting. He was into the same music as me, liked the same movies. We talked about everything, from our favorite pizza toppings to our biggest fears. It felt easy, like I'd known him forever. After a week of texting, he suggested we meet up. We decided on a coffee shop downtown. I was actually nervous, which was weird. I usually don't get nervous about meeting people, but there was something about Alex that made my stomach do flips. The coffee shop was crowded when I got there. I scanned the tables, looking for him, and then I saw him, sitting in the corner, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked even better in person. He smiled when he saw me, and all my anxiety melted away. We talked for hours that day, about our families, our dreams, our insecurities. It was like we were the only two people in the world. He walked me back to my car, and we hugged goodbye. It was the perfect first date. We started seeing each other a lot after that. Movies, concerts, hikes in the woods. He even took me to this secluded lake a few towns over. It was beautiful, the water crystal clear, surrounded by towering trees. We spent the whole day swimming and laughing. But then things started to get weird. It was subtle at first, almost unnoticeable. He started asking me strange questions. Questions about my childhood, about my relationships with my parents. He wanted to know everything about me, every detail. It felt invasive. He also started acting possessive. He didn't like it when I hung out with my friends without him. He would call and text constantly, wanting to know where I was, who I was with. It was suffocating. One night, we were at his apartment, watching a movie. He lived in this old, creepy building downtown, the kind with long hallways and flickering lights. He paused the movie and turned to me, his eyes intense. "Do you ever feel like you're being watched?" he asked. I laughed nervously. "What do you mean?" "Like someone is always there, just out of sight, observing you." I shrugged. "I guess sometimes. Everyone feels that way, right?" He stared at me, his expression unreadable. "Not like this." I tried to change the subject, but he wouldn't let it go. He kept talking about being watched, about feeling a presence. It was freaking me out. Then, he told me about his dreams. Vivid, disturbing dreams where he was being hunted. He said he could feel the hunter getting closer, that it was only a matter of time before it caught him. I tried to reassure him, to tell him it was just a dream, but he wouldn't listen. He was convinced it was real. Things escalated quickly after that. He became more and more paranoid. He started seeing shadows in the corners of his eyes, hearing voices in the static of the radio. He stopped going to work, stopped leaving his apartment. He was convinced that someone was after him. I tried to help him, to convince him to see a doctor, but he refused. He said they wouldn't understand. One day, I went to his apartment, and he wasn't there. His door was unlocked, the apartment empty. His phone was on the table, along with a note. The note was addressed to me. It said, "They're here. They know everything. Run." I didn't know what to do. I called the police, but they couldn't find him. They said he probably just ran away. I went back to my life, trying to forget about Alex. But I couldn't. His words kept echoing in my head. "They're here. They know everything. Run." A few weeks later, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. I opened it, and inside was a USB drive. I plugged the drive into my computer, and a folder popped up. It was filled with photos. Photos of me. Photos of me sleeping. Photos of me in my backyard. Photos of me driving my car. Photos of me doing everyday things. Someone had been watching me. I scrolled through the photos, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw it. A photo of me inside my house. I was sitting on the couch, reading a book. And in the background, standing in the doorway, was Alex. But it wasn't Alex. It was me. I was standing in the doorway, staring at myself. The expression on my face was blank, emotionless. I slammed the laptop shut, my hands shaking. I didn't understand. What was happening? I called the police again, showed them the photos. They said it was probably just a prank, that someone was trying to scare me. But I knew it was more than that. Alex had been warning me. He was trying to protect me from myself. I started researching dissociative identity disorder, reading everything I could find. The symptoms matched everything that had been happening. The paranoia, the memory gaps, the feeling of being watched. Then I found something that made my blood run cold. A study about people with DID who develop alter egos, that are aware of their own existence. Alters that can communicate with each other, even when the host is unaware. It hit me like a ton of bricks. Alex wasn't warning me about someone else. He was warning me about myself. He was the alter, and I was the host. And the alter was trying to take over. I still don't know what happened to Alex. I don't know if he's gone, or if he's still lurking somewhere inside my head. But I know that I'm not safe. I know that I'm being watched. By myself. I started therapy, trying to integrate the alter, but the therapist said my story doesn't make any logical sense. Alex wasn't real, so I must have been faking it all. He even made me delete my Hinge account. I still have the pictures, and I am scared to be alone. This feels like a fever dream, and I can't believe I paid for coffee and gas money. That alter better pay up when I see them. Okay, so, I never thought I'd be one of those people with a dating app horror story. I always figured those were blown way out of proportion, you know? But man, was I wrong. This is gonna sound crazy, but I swear it's all true. It started with a Hinge match, of all things. Her name was Sarah, and her profile was pretty normal. Cute pictures, liked hiking, loved dogs, typical stuff. We matched, and her opening line was actually funny. So I figured, what the heck? We chatted for a few days, and she seemed totally down to earth. We had a lot in common, at least, that's what I thought. We decided to meet up at this coffee shop near my place. It was a Friday night, and I was actually kind of excited. I hadn't been on a date in forever, and Sarah seemed genuinely cool. I got there a little early and grabbed a table by the window, watching people walk by, trying to play it cool. Then Sarah showed up. Okay, she looked exactly like her pictures, which was a relief. But something was off. It's hard to explain. She was too quiet, almost like she was holding back. I figured she was just nervous, so I tried to keep the conversation flowing. We talked about our jobs, our families, our hobbies. Everything seemed normal, but I still couldn't shake this weird feeling. After about an hour, she suggested we go for a walk in the park nearby. It was a nice night, and I didn't see any reason to say no. So we strolled into the park, and that's when things started to get really weird. The park was almost empty, just a few couples here and there. As we walked deeper into the park, Sarah started acting even stranger. She kept looking over her shoulder, like someone was following us. I asked her if she was okay, and she just brushed it off, saying she was just a little paranoid. We reached this old, creepy-looking gazebo in the center of the park. It was covered in vines, and the paint was peeling. Sarah stopped and stared at it for a long time, and it felt like she was in a trance. "This is it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "This is what?" I asked, completely confused. She didn't answer. Instead, she reached into her purse and pulled out a small, silver locket. She opened it, and inside was a tiny picture of a woman. The woman looked exactly like Sarah, but she was wearing clothes from, 100 years ago. "My great-grandmother," Sarah said, still whispering. "She died right here, in this gazebo." Okay, now I was officially freaked out. I started backing away slowly, trying to figure out how to get out of there without making things worse. "She wants me to avenge her," Sarah continued, her eyes fixed on the gazebo. "She was murdered, and the man who did it, his bloodline still lives. I didn't know what to say. I just stood there frozen, watching Sarah descend into what I could only describe as madness. Then she turned to me, and her eyes were completely different. They were cold, empty, and filled with hate. "You," she said, her voice low and menacing. "You look just like him." I swear my heart stopped. I didn't know who him was, but I knew I was in serious danger. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, not looking back, not stopping until I was out of the park and back on the main street. I didn't even stop until I was back at my apartment, locking the door behind me and barricading myself inside. I didn't sleep that night. I kept seeing Sarah's face in my head, those cold, empty eyes staring at me. I tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream, that Sarah was just crazy, and I had somehow gotten caught up in her delusion. The next day, I did some research. I looked up the history of the park, the gazebo, anything that could explain what happened. And that's when I found it. An old newspaper article, dated back to the late 1800s. It was about a woman who had been murdered in the park in the gazebo. Her name was Sarah, and she had been killed by her fiancé, a man named Well. His last name was the same as mine. Turns out, my great-great-grandfather was a real piece of work. He was a wealthy landowner, and he had gotten Sarah pregnant. But he didn't want to marry her, so he killed her and covered it up. I was horrified. I couldn't believe that my family had such a dark secret, and I couldn't believe that I had somehow stumbled into the middle of it. I decided to call Sarah. I needed to talk to her, to explain that I had nothing to do with what my ancestor had done. I found her number on Hinge and took a deep breath before calling. She picked up on the third ring. "Hello," she said, her voice sounding normal, almost cheerful. "Sarah, it's me, my name," I said, my voice shaking. "I need to talk to you about last night." "Last night?" she said, sounding confused. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never met you before." I was stunned. "What? But we went on a date. We went to the park. You showed me the locket. I think you have the wrong number," she said, and then she hung up. I tried calling back, but she didn't answer. I sent her a message on Hinge, but she didn't respond. It was like she had completely vanished. I spent the next few days trying to figure out what was going on. I checked her social media, but there was nothing. No pictures, no posts, no anything. It was like she didn't exist. Then, one day, I was looking through some old family photos, trying to find a picture of my great-great-grandfather. And that's when I saw it. A picture of my grandmother when she was a little girl. She was standing next to a woman. The woman looked exactly like Sarah. Exactly like the woman in the locket. But it couldn't be. Sarah was young, in her 20s. This woman was old, maybe in her 80s. I looked closer at the picture, and that's when I noticed something. The woman was holding a silver locket. I did some more digging, and I found out that my grandmother had a twin sister. A twin sister who had disappeared when they were children. A twin sister who was rumored to have been psychic. The truth hit me like a ton of bricks. Sarah wasn't avenging her great-grandmother. She was her great-grandmother. Or, at least, the spirit of her great-grandmother, somehow living on in her twin sister. She was looking for me. I don't know how she did it, how she found me on Hinge, how she knew about my family history. But I knew one thing. She wasn't going to stop until she had her revenge. I packed my bags, sold my apartment, and moved across the country, changing my name, hoping to escape the vengeful spirit of my ancestor's victim. I still look over my shoulder, though. I still get that feeling that I'm being watched, and I still have nightmares about those cold, empty eyes. And to think, it all started with a Hinge match. I'm never using dating apps again. Okay, so dating apps, right? Total crapshoot. You swipe, you match, you chat, and 99% of the time it fizzles out before you even grab coffee. But this one was different, and not in a good way. I'm still trying to figure out what the hell happened, and writing it down might actually help, or maybe it'll just freak me out more. Here goes nothing. It started, like they all do, with a profile. Her name was Sarah, and her pictures were striking. Not like conventionally beautiful, but there was something about her eyes that just drew you in. Like she knew something you didn't, and it was probably terrifying. Her bio was short and kinda weird. Loves old things, hates being predictable. Okay, red flag number one, maybe? But I swiped right anyway. Sue me, I was bored. We matched almost instantly, and she messaged me first, which was rare. Hi, she wrote. What's the oldest thing you own? Weird opener, right? I told her about my grandfather's watch, a beat-up old thing that barely kept time, but meant a lot to me. She responded with, "That's nice, but I meant really old." The conversation just got weirder from there. She kept asking me about my family history, my childhood home, anything that seemed vaguely connected to the past. I tried to steer the conversation towards normal dating app stuff, movies, music, what I did for a living, but she always brought it back to the past. It was like she was trying to dig something up. Literally. After a few days of this, she asked me to meet her. Not for coffee, not for dinner, but at an antique store on the edge of town. It's called Yesterday's Treasures, she wrote. Meet me there at 8 p.m. Don't be late. Okay, alarm bells were definitely ringing now. But curiosity, and maybe a little bit of that stupid, I can fix her mentality, got the better of me. I agreed. The antique store was exactly what you'd expect, dusty, cluttered, and smelling faintly of mothballs. The kind of place where you feel like you're being watched by 100 pairs of dead eyes. Sarah was already there, standing in the middle of the store, surrounded by old furniture and forgotten trinkets. She was wearing a long, black dress that made her look even more unsettling than her pictures. "You came," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Good." She led me through the maze of antiques, deeper and deeper into the store. The air grew colder, and the silence became heavier. I started to feel a knot of anxiety forming in my stomach. Finally, she stopped in front of a large, ornate mirror. It was old, really old, with a cracked frame and a cloudy surface. "Do you see it?" she asked, her eyes fixed on the mirror. "See what?" I asked, feeling a growing sense of dread. "The past," she said. "It's all right there, trapped inside." She reached out and touched the mirror, and I swear, for a second, I thought I saw something move in the reflection. A flicker of movement, a shadow, something that wasn't there a moment before. "My family," she whispered. "They're trapped." That's when she told me the story. Her family had owned the antique store for generations. Years ago, her great-great-grandfather had made a deal with a something. She didn't say what, but it was clear it wasn't human. The deal was for wealth and prosperity, but the price was that the souls of the family would be trapped within the mirror. Sarah believed that she could break the curse, but she needed someone to help her. Someone who wasn't connected to the family. Someone who was pure. I guess that's where I came in. She asked me to touch the mirror, to focus my energy on breaking the curse. I hesitated. This was insane, but there was something in her eyes, a desperate plea that I couldn't ignore. So I did it. I touched the mirror. The moment my fingers made contact, the store went cold. The air crackled with energy. The mirror started to shake. And then the reflection changed. It wasn't me and Sarah staring back at me anymore. It was a group of people, dressed in old-fashioned clothes, their faces twisted in agony. They were reaching out, trying to break free. Sarah started chanting something in a language I didn't understand. The mirror shook harder, and the reflection became more and more distorted. I felt a surge of energy coursing through my body, like I was being electrocuted. Then, everything went black. I woke up on the floor of the antique store. Sarah was gone. The mirror was still there, but the reflection was normal. Just me, looking like an idiot who'd been sucker punched by a ghost. I got out of there as fast as I could. I went home, took a long shower, and tried to forget the whole thing. I deleted Sarah's profile from Hinge and vowed to never use a dating app again. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That something was different. A few weeks later, I was talking to my mom about my grandfather's watch, the one I told Sarah about. She said something that made my blood run cold. "You know," she said, "that watch isn't actually your grandfather's. It belonged to his father. He got it from his father, and so on. It's been in our family for generations. They say it carries some kind of curse." I stared at her, my mind racing. A curse? A family curse? That's when it hit me. Sarah wasn't trying to break a curse. She was trying to transfer it. She needed someone pure to take the curse from her family and pass it on to another. And I, like a complete moron, had fallen for it. I'm still wearing the watch. I can't bring myself to take it off. Every time I look at it, I see the faces in the mirror, the trapped souls, the burden I now carry. I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get rid of it. All I know is that Sarah is out there, somewhere, free from her family's curse. And I'm stuck with it. The worst part, I think I'm starting to like old things. I'm not usually one to buy into the whole ghosts and demons thing, but something seriously messed up happened to me last year, and I still can't shake it off. It all started with a Hinge match. Yeah, I know. Dating apps are usually a cesspool, but I was bored, lonely, and figured, what the heck? Her profile was different. Not in a bad way, just unsettling. Her name was Lila, and all her photos were black and white, kind of grainy, like they were taken with an old disposable camera. She had this intense stare, piercing, and in every picture, she was in a different, super old-looking place. One was in front of a dilapidated Victorian house, another in what looked like an abandoned factory, and another in some overgrown graveyard. Weird, right? But her bio was what really got me. It was just one sentence. Looking for someone to explore forgotten places with. Okay, that was intriguing. I was always a sucker for history and exploring, so I swiped right, and she matched me. We chatted for a bit, mostly about our mutual interest in forgotten history. She was cryptic, though, always hinting at things unseen and energies that linger. I chalked it up to her being a bit of an artsy type, you know? We planned a date, and she suggested meeting at this old abandoned train station about an hour outside of town. Red flags should have been waving like crazy, but I was honestly too curious. The drive was long and creepy. The sun was setting, and the back roads were twisting and turning through dense woods. I finally arrived at the station, and it was even more desolate than I imagined. The platform was cracked and overgrown with weeds, the old ticket booth was boarded up, and the air was thick with the smell of damp wood and decay. Lila was already there, standing in the shadows under the old station awning. She was wearing a long, black coat and a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of her face. Seriously, she looked like she stepped out of a horror movie. "Ready to explore?" she asked, her voice low and almost a whisper. I swallowed hard. "Yeah, let's do it." She led me off the platform and into the woods. We walked for what felt like forever, deeper and deeper into the darkness. The trees were gnarled and twisted, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under our feet. Lila didn't say much, just kept walking, her eyes scanning the trees. Finally, we came to a clearing. In the center stood an old, stone building. It was small, like a chapel, but completely covered in vines and moss. The door was partially open, creaking in the wind. "This is it," Lila said, her voice barely audible. "The place where the veil is thin." I had no idea what she was talking about, but I followed her inside. The air inside the chapel was freezing cold. It smelled like dirt and something else, something like burnt hair. There were old wooden pews covered in dust, and the walls were covered in faded frescoes. Lila walked to the front of the chapel, to what was once the altar. She pulled something out of her coat pocket, a small, tarnished silver locket. She opened it and held it up. "This belonged to a woman who died here many years ago," she said. "She's trapped, and I want to help her move on." Okay, now I was starting to get seriously freaked out. I'm not a ghost hunter or anything, but here I was, in a creepy old chapel in the middle of nowhere, with a girl who thought she could talk to dead people. She started chanting something in a language I didn't understand. The air grew colder, and I felt a strange pressure in my chest. The shadows in the chapel seemed to deepen and swirl. I wanted to leave, to run screaming back to my car, but I was frozen in place. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew through the chapel, slamming the door shut. The chanting stopped. Lila looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "She's here," she whispered. I didn't see anything, but I felt it. A presence. Something cold and malevolent. The temperature dropped even further, and I could see my breath in the air. The frescoes on the walls seemed to twist and writhe, and I thought I could hear faint whispers. Lila started chanting again, her voice trembling. The pressure in my chest intensified, and I felt like I was suffocating. Then I saw it. A flicker of movement in the shadows. A dark shape, slowly forming in the corner of the chapel. It was tall and gaunt, with long, spindly limbs and a head that was too large for its body. Its eyes were black and empty, and it stared directly at me. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I was completely paralyzed with terror. The shape started to move towards me. Slowly, deliberately. I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the worst. But then nothing happened. I waited, but the shape didn't touch me. I opened my eyes, and the chapel was empty. Lila was gone. The door was open, and the sun was starting to rise. I stumbled out of the chapel, gasping for air. I ran all the way back to my car, not stopping until I was safely inside. I drove home in a daze, trying to process what I had just witnessed. Was it real? Was I hallucinating? I didn't know, but I knew one thing. I was never going anywhere with Lila again. I blocked her number and deleted her from Hinge. I tried to forget the whole thing, but I couldn't. The image of that dark shape in the chapel kept haunting my dreams. A few weeks later, I was telling the story to a friend, trying to make light of it. He laughed and said, "Dude, you probably just met a LARPer. Some people are really into that stuff." I wanted to believe him, but I couldn't shake the feeling that what I saw was real. So, I decided to do some research. I spent hours online, searching for information about the abandoned train station and the chapel. I found some old newspaper articles about the station, but nothing about the chapel. Then, I stumbled across a local historical society website. They had a section on forgotten landmarks in the area, and there it was, a picture of the chapel. The caption read, "St. Jude's Chapel, built in 1888, site of a tragic fire in 1902, which claimed the lives of several patients at a nearby asylum. The cause of the fire remains unknown." Asylum. That piqued my interest. I clicked on a link to another page about the asylum. It was called Blackwood Asylum, and it was notorious for its inhumane treatment of patients. One of the patients, a woman named Sarah, was said to be particularly troubled. She believed she was being haunted by a demon. Then I saw it. A picture of Sarah. It was a grainy, black and white photo, just like the ones on Lila's Hinge profile. And the woman in the picture, it was Lila. That black and white photo, it was Lila. It wasn't an old picture, it was now. Lila was Sarah. Sarah Blackwood. She was still in the asylum, or was she? Okay, so, boom. Let me tell you about the time I nearly lost my mind because of a freaking dating app. You know how everyone's always talking about finding the one online? Yeah. Well, I think I found something else. Something seriously messed up. It all started with a profile on Hinge, obviously. I was bored, my friends were all coupled up, and I figured, what the heck? Might as well give it a shot. I wasn't expecting much. I mean, dating apps are basically a digital dumpster fire, right? But then I matched with this girl, Sarah. Her pictures were different. Not bad different, just off. Like, she was pretty, don't get me wrong. Long dark hair, piercing blue eyes, the whole deal. But there was this unsettling stillness in all her photos, like she was posing for a Victorian-era portrait or something. Her bio was even weirder. It just said, "Looking for someone to share stories with." Okay, cryptic. I'm usually not into the whole mysterious vibe, but something about her profile made me click. We started chatting, and honestly, she was kind of captivating. She didn't talk about the usual stuff, jobs, hobbies, favorite Netflix shows. Instead, she asked me about my dreams, my fears, the things that kept me up at night. It was intense. And yeah, maybe a little too intense for someone I'd just met on a dating app. But I was hooked. I felt like she actually saw me, you know, which is a pretty rare feeling. We talked for hours every night, and the more I learned about her, the more unsettling things became. She was evasive about her job, her family, where she lived. She always steered the conversation back to me, back to my innermost thoughts. It was flattering, but also creepy, like she was trying to get inside my head. One night, I asked her straight up, "Okay, Sarah, what's the deal? Why are you so secretive?" She didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, she sent me a message that made my blood run cold. "I have a story to tell," she wrote, but it's not one I can share online. You have to come and hear it in person." She gave me an address. It was way out in the country, miles from anywhere. An old farmhouse, she said, abandoned for years. I should have said no. I should have blocked her and reported her to Hinge. But something about her message, it was like a siren song. I couldn't resist. So stupidly, I drove out there. It was a dark, moonless night. The farmhouse was even creepier in person. The windows were boarded up, the paint was peeling, and the whole place just reeked of decay. I almost turned around, but then I saw a light flicker in one of the windows. She was waiting for me. I walked up to the front door and knocked. It creaked open slowly, revealing Sarah standing in the doorway. She looked different than in her pictures. Pale, almost translucent. Her eyes seemed to glow in the dim light. "You came," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I stepped inside. The air was thick with dust and the smell of mildew. The only light came from a single candle on a table in the center of the room. "What is this place?" I asked, my voice trembling. "This is where my story begins," she said. She sat down at the table and motioned for me to do the same. I hesitated, but I sat. She began to speak, and her story was insane. She claimed she was centuries old, a spirit trapped in this world. She said she needed someone to listen to her story, to bear witness to her existence, or she would fade away completely. The story went on for hours. It was a tale of love, betrayal, and unspeakable tragedy. Sarah spoke of wars, plagues, and the slow, agonizing passage of time. I didn't know what to believe. Part of me thought she was completely delusional, but another part of me, I don't know. I felt like I was being drawn into her world. As she spoke, the candle flickered and dimmed. The shadows in the room seemed to grow deeper, more menacing. I felt a coldness creeping into my bones, a sense of dread that I'd never felt before. Then, Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was ice cold. "You believe me, don't you?" she whispered. "You have to believe me." I didn't know what to say. I wanted to run, to scream, to get as far away from this place as possible. But I was paralyzed. I just stared into her eyes, and I saw something. Something ancient, something sad, something terrifying. I stammered. "I don't know what to believe." She smiled a slow, chilling smile. "Then let me show you," she said. She stood up and walked over to a dusty mirror hanging on the wall. "Look," she said, pointing to the reflection. I looked into the mirror, and I saw myself. But it wasn't me. It was me, but older, worn out, empty. And standing behind me, in the reflection, was Sarah, her eyes glowing with an unholy light. "I told you I needed someone to share stories with," she said. "But I didn't tell you what kind of stories. I need your memories, your life, your very essence. I need to live again." I realized what was happening. She wasn't just telling me a story. She was trying to steal my life. She was trying to replace me. I tried to pull away, but her grip was too strong. She was draining me, bit by bit. I could feel my memories fading, my personality dissolving. Then, something unexpected happened. The front door burst open, and a beam of light flooded the room. A man stood in the doorway, holding a flashlight. "Sarah," he shouted, "I know you're in here. Let her go." Sarah turned, startled. Her grip on my hand loosened. I stumbled backward, away from the mirror. The man rushed towards us, tackling Sarah to the ground. They wrestled for a moment. Then the man pulled something from his pocket, a silver crucifix. He held it up to Sarah's face, and she screamed. A high-pitched, unearthly scream. The light from the candle flickered and went out. The room plunged into darkness. When the man switched on his flashlight again, Sarah was gone, vanished. He turned to me, his face etched with concern. "Are you okay?" he asked. I stared at him blankly. I didn't know who he was. I didn't know where I was. I didn't even know my own name. He helped me out of the house and into his car. As we drove away, I looked back at the farmhouse. It was dark and silent, just a crumbling ruin in the middle of nowhere. The man took me to the police station. I told them everything that had happened, but they didn't believe me. They said I was probably hallucinating. They checked out the farmhouse, but they found nothing. No Sarah, no candle, No mirror. Just an abandoned building. I spent weeks in therapy, trying to piece together what had happened. Slowly, my memories started to return. I remembered my name, my life, my friends. But I never forgot Sarah. And I never forgot the feeling of being drained, of having my life stolen. A few months later, I was scrolling through Hinge again. Yeah, I know. I'm an idiot. And I saw a familiar face. It was Sarah. Different pictures, different name, but the same unsettling stillness in her eyes. The same cryptic bio. Looking for someone to share stories with. I reported the profile to Hinge, but I don't know if they did anything about it. I deleted my account and swore I'd never go back on a dating app again. Some things are better left undiscovered. The man who saved me, turns out he was a paranormal investigator. He had been tracking Sarah for years, trying to stop her from preying on innocent people. He told me she was a succubus, a demon who feeds on human energy. I don't know if I believe all that, but I do know one thing. I got incredibly lucky. And honestly, I have no idea how that app is still up and running. Because if she did that to me, who knows how many other people she did that to? This is going to sound totally insane, I know. I almost didn't even want to type it out, but my therapist keeps telling me I need to get it out there, you know? So here goes. It all started, predictably, with Hinge. I was bored, scrolling through profiles, same old. Gym selfies, travel pics, the occasional I love dogs declaration. Whatever. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just something to break up the monotony of my life. I lived in this old apartment building downtown, the kind with creaky floors and perpetually dim hallways. It had character, I guess, but sometimes it felt more like a setting for a bad horror movie. Then I saw her profile. Her name was Alara, and she was different. The photos weren't the usual filtered perfection. They were kind of grainy, almost vintage-looking. She had this intense gaze, like she was staring right through the camera, and her bio was just a single line. Seeker of forgotten things. Creepy, right? But something about it intrigued me. I swiped right. We matched. We started chatting, and she was even weirder online. She didn't talk about her job, or her hobbies, or any of the normal stuff. She just asked me questions about my dreams, my fears, the things I kept hidden from the world. It was unnerving, but also compelling. I found myself telling her things I hadn't told anyone before. She eventually suggested we meet up. Not for coffee, or a drink, or anything normal like that. She wanted to meet at the old Blackwood Cemetery on the edge of town. At midnight. I know. Red flags everywhere. My brain was screaming at me to unmatch and block her number. But this weird, twisted part of me was too curious to back down. So stupidly I went. The cemetery was exactly as you'd expect. Overgrown, silent, and shrouded in mist. The air was heavy with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. I found Alara waiting for me near the oldest part of the cemetery, where the tombstones were crumbling and illegible. She was wearing a long, black dress and her face was pale in the moonlight. "You came," she said, her voice low and breathy. "Yeah, well, I'm an idiot," I muttered. She ignored my comment and led me deeper into the cemetery. She stopped in front of a particularly large and ornate tombstone. It was covered in ivy and moss, and the inscription was completely worn away. "This is where it begins," she said. "The search for the forgotten." She then told me this whole story about how the cemetery was built on top of an old insane asylum, and that some of the patients were buried here, their stories lost to time. She believed their spirits were still trapped, and that she could somehow communicate with them. I was starting to seriously regret my life choices. I wanted to turn around and run, but I was also morbidly fascinated. I mean, who actually believes this stuff? Alara pulled out a small, silver locket from her pocket. "This belonged to one of the patients," she said. "It's a key." She pressed the locket against the tombstone, and a faint click echoed through the cemetery. I swear to God, I'm not making this up. A section of the tombstone slid open, revealing a dark, narrow passage. "Are you serious?" I whispered. "Are you coming?" she asked, her eyes gleaming in the darkness. I hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath and followed her into the passage. The passage was damp and cold, and the air was thick with the smell of mildew. We walked for what felt like forever, the only light coming from a small flashlight Alara was carrying. The walls were lined with rough-hewn stones, and I could hear water dripping somewhere in the distance. Finally, we reached a small, circular room. In the center of the room was a stone altar, and on the altar was a single, withered rose. "This is it," Alara said, "the heart of the forgotten." She placed the locket on the altar and began to chant in some language I didn't recognize. Her voice grew louder and louder, and the air in the room began to vibrate. I felt a strange pressure in my head, like something was trying to push its way in. Suddenly, the rose on the altar burst into flames. The flames burned with an unnatural intensity, casting flickering shadows on the walls. I felt a surge of panic rising in my chest. "What's happening?" I screamed. Alara didn't answer. She just kept chanting, her eyes closed, her face contorted in ecstasy. Then the room began to shake. The walls cracked, and dust rained down from the ceiling. I thought the whole place was going to collapse. I grabbed Alara's arm and tried to pull her away from the altar, but she wouldn't budge. She was completely entranced, lost in her ritual. "We have to get out of here," I yelled, but it was too late. The ground beneath us began to crumble, and we both plunged into darkness. I woke up in a hospital bed. My head was pounding, and my body was covered in bruises. A doctor told me I had been found unconscious in the cemetery, near an old, abandoned mausoleum. Alara was gone. The police searched the cemetery, but they found no sign of her, or the passage, or the underground room. They said I must have been hallucinating, that I had probably hit my head and imagined the whole thing. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. I tried to find Alara online, but her profile was gone. It was like she never existed. I've been trying to forget about it, to move on with my life. But I can't. Every time I close my eyes, I see her face, hear her chanting, feel the ground crumbling beneath my feet. Then, the other day, I was going through some old boxes in my attic. I found a box of old photos that belonged to my grandmother. I started flipping through them, feeling nostalgic. And then I saw it, a photo of my grandmother standing in front of the Blackwood Cemetery. Next to her was a woman in a long, black dress. It was Alara, but the photo was taken in 1952. You're never going to believe what happened to me after I downloaded Hinge. Seriously, I'm still trying to process it all. I'm usually a pretty chill person, not easily spooked, but this was different. This was messed up. It all started like any other dating app story. I was bored, single, and my friends kept bugging me to put myself out there. So fine, I caved. Created a profile, uploaded some pics, carefully curated, obviously. Gotta present the best version of yourself, right? And started swiping. It was the usual parade of gym selfies, guys holding fish, and bios that were either painfully generic or trying way too hard to be clever. Then I saw him. His name was, well, I'm not going to say his real name. Let's call him Alex. He had this look about him, kind of intense, kind of mysterious. His pictures weren't posed or anything, just natural shots of him doing stuff. Hiking, reading, sitting in a coffee shop. He seemed interesting. And okay, yeah, he was really cute. His bio was short and sweet. Looking for someone to explore the city with. Simple enough. I swiped right. We matched. We started chatting, and things were going great. He was funny, smart, and actually seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked about everything. Our favorite movies, our dreams, our weirdest childhood memories. He even remembered little details I'd mentioned in passing, which was kind of impressive. After a week of talking, he suggested we meet up. We decided on a small, kind of divey bar downtown. It seemed like a neutral, low-pressure spot. I was actually excited. I hadn't felt this spark with someone in ages. The night of the date, I got ready way earlier than necessary. Picked out an outfit, did my hair, the whole deal. I was nervous, but in a good way. I got to the bar a few minutes early and grabbed a table. Alex texted me saying he was running a few minutes late, which wasn't a big deal. I ordered a drink and just chilled, scrolling through Instagram to kill time. 20 minutes passed. No Alex. I texted him, but didn't get a response. I figured he was just stuck in traffic or something. 30 minutes. Still nothing. I was starting to get a little annoyed. An hour. Okay, now I was officially stood up. I finished my drink, feeling a mix of disappointment and anger. I decided to give him one last shot and texted him again. Just a simple, "Hey, everything okay?" I didn't expect a response. But then my phone buzzed. It was a picture message. It was a picture of my living room. I froze. My heart started pounding in my chest. There was no way. I hadn't shown Alex my apartment. Hadn't even mentioned where I lived. I stared at the picture, trying to make sense of it. It was definitely my living room. My couch, my coffee table, the weird painting I'd picked up at a flea market. It was all there. Then I noticed something in the corner of the picture. A dark figure, standing in the shadows. It was blurry, but I could make out the outline of a person. I tried to call Alex, but my call went straight to voicemail. I was panicking now, trying to figure out what to do. Should I call the cops? Go home. I decided to go home. I know. It probably wasn't the smartest thing to do, but I couldn't just sit there and wait. I had to know what was going on. The entire cab ride home, I was a mess. My hands were shaking, and I kept picturing that shadowy figure in my living room. When I finally got to my apartment building, I hesitated before getting out of the cab. I felt like I was walking into a trap. I paid the driver and slowly made my way to my front door. I took a deep breath and unlocked it. The apartment was dark and silent. I reached for the light switch and flipped it on. Everything looked normal. My living room was exactly as I'd left it. No shadowy figure, no sign of anyone being there. I walked around the apartment, checking every room. Nothing. It was like the picture had been a hallucination. I sat down on my couch, trying to calm my nerves. Maybe it was just a prank, some kind of sick joke. But how did he get a picture of my living room? Then I remembered something. A few weeks ago, I had a new smart TV installed. The installer had asked if he could take a picture of my living room to calibrate the colors, or something. I hadn't thought anything of it at the time. Could that be it? Had he somehow hacked into the installer's phone or computer and gotten the picture? I pulled out my phone and started searching for the installer's company online. I found their website and scrolled through their About Us page. And then I saw him, Alex. His profile picture was right there on the website. He wasn't some random guy I'd met on Hinge. He was the guy who installed my TV. I suddenly recalled how friendly he had been and how he had lingered a little longer than necessary. I felt sick to my stomach. I called the police, and they came over and searched the apartment. They took my statement and said they would look into it. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and groan of the building sent a jolt of fear through me. I kept replaying the events of the evening in my head, trying to figure out what I had missed. The next day, the police called. They had tracked down Alex. He denied everything, of course. Said he had no idea how his picture ended up on Hinge. Said he had never sent me any pictures. But the police found something else. They found a hidden camera in my new smart TV. A hidden camera that had been broadcasting live footage of my apartment. The police asked if they could check my phone, and I allowed it. They found out that he had been planning on coming back later that night and was making sure I was asleep. They arrested him, and he's now facing charges. I'm still dealing with the aftermath. I have trouble sleeping, and I'm constantly looking over my shoulder. But the worst part is the feeling of being violated, of having my privacy invaded in such a personal way. I deleted Hinge, obviously. I don't think I'll be trying online dating again anytime soon. But here's the really messed up part. After everything, after the arrest, after the therapy, after moving to a new apartment, I got a package in the mail. It was a small, unmarked box. Inside was a USB drive. I plugged it into my computer, and a single file popped up. It was a video. I clicked play. The video started with a close-up of Alex's face. He was smiling, but his eyes were cold and empty. "I just wanted to show you something," he said. "Something you should know." He then panned the camera to show his surroundings. He was in a dimly lit room, surrounded by computer equipment. "You think I was the only one watching," he said. "You think this was just about you." He zoomed out further, revealing a room full of monitors, each displaying a different feed. They were all from smart devices, TVs, laptops, phones, baby monitors. Hundreds of them. "We're always watching," he said. "Everyone is." The video ended. I unplugged the USB drive and threw it across the room. I wanted to destroy it, to erase it from existence. But I couldn't. The message was clear. It wasn't just about Alex. It was about something bigger, something more sinister. It was about the fact that we're all being watched, all the time. And there's nothing we can do about it. And the worst part, it wasn't just Alex's face that I recognized. I saw my friends, all the people who wanted to find love. All of them were being broadcasted to the world. I guess I'm not the only one with a messed up story. It all started innocently enough. I was bored, recently single, and my friends were all coupled up. So I did what any self-respecting 20-something would do. I downloaded Hinge. Swiping seemed harmless enough, mostly just judging people's questionable taste in selfies and bios. Then I saw her profile. Sarah. She was striking. Not just pretty, but like captivating. Her pictures were all artsy and stuff, black and white, grainy, like she was some kind of vintage movie star. She had this intense gaze that just sucked you in. Her bio was short and cryptic, looking for someone to explore the forgotten corners with. Creepy? Maybe a little. Intriguing? Definitely. Against my better judgment, I swiped right, and she matched. We started chatting, and it was immediately different than any other online conversation I'd had. She wasn't into small talk. She asked deep, thought-provoking questions about my dreams, my fears, my childhood. It was kinda intense, but also thrilling. I felt like she actually saw me, you know? After a week of nonstop texting, she suggested we meet, but not for coffee or drinks. She wanted to meet at this abandoned amusement park on the outskirts of town. "It's where the real magic happens," she texted. Red flags were going off like crazy in my head, but I was also completely hooked. I told myself it was just my adventurous side kicking in. Plus, I really wanted to see if she was as amazing in person as she was online. The park was even creepier than I imagined. The Ferris wheel was rusted and skeletal against the twilight sky. The carousel was silent and still, its painted horses chipped and faded. Everything was covered in a layer of grime and overgrown weeds. It felt like stepping into a horror movie. Sarah was already there, standing by the entrance to what used to be the haunted house. She was wearing a long, black dress and a wide-brimmed hat that hid most of her face. Even from a distance, that gaze was piercing. "You came," she said, her voice low and melodic. I swallowed hard and nodded. "Yeah, I did." She smiled a slow, unsettling smile. "Good. I have so much to show you." We spent the next few hours exploring the park. She knew all the hidden corners, the secret passages, the forgotten stories behind each attraction. She talked about the park like it was a living thing, like it had a soul. It was weird, but I was also completely captivated. As the night wore on, her stories got darker. She told me about accidents that had happened at the park, about the people who had died there, about the ghosts that still roamed the grounds. She claimed she could feel their presence, that they were drawn to her. I started to get really creeped out. I thought I was into spooky stuff, but this was on a whole other level. I tried to lighten the mood, make a joke or something, but she just stared at me with those intense eyes. Then, she led me to the old hall of mirrors. The glass was cracked and distorted, reflecting our images back at us in grotesque ways. It was disorienting and unsettling. "This is where things get interesting," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind whistling through the broken windows. She started walking through the mirrors, touching them lightly with her fingertips. As she moved, her reflection seemed to change. Her face would flicker, morphing into different expressions, different ages, different people. I stood frozen, my heart pounding in my chest. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed by fear and fascination. Suddenly, she stopped in front of one particular mirror. Her reflection in that mirror wasn't her. It was an old woman, her face lined and withered, her eyes filled with a deep, ancient sadness. "Do you see her?" Sarah asked, her voice raspy and strained. "She's been waiting for you." I stared at the reflection, my mind reeling. Who was this woman? What did she want? And what was Sarah doing? Then, the reflection reached out of the mirror. Not literally, but it felt like it. The old woman's eyes locked with mine, and I felt a jolt of electricity run through my body. Images flooded my mind, scenes from the past, memories that weren't mine, faces I didn't recognize. I stumbled backward, clutching my head. The images were overwhelming, suffocating. I felt like I was drowning in someone else's life. When I finally managed to pull myself together, Sarah was gone. The hall of mirrors was empty. The only sound was the wind howling through the broken windows. I ran out of the park, not stopping until I reached my car. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing, my body trembling. I tried to make sense of what had happened, but it was impossible. Had I imagined it all? Was I losing my mind? I spent the next few days trying to forget about Sarah, about the amusement park, about the Hall of Mirrors. I deleted her number, blocked her on Hinge, tried to convince myself that it was all just a bad dream. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong, that something had changed. Then one day, I was going through some old family photos with my mom. We were laughing and reminiscing when I came across a picture of my great-grandmother. I'd never met her. She'd passed away long before I was born. And that was when it hit me. The old woman in the mirror. She was the spitting image of my great-grandmother. I asked my mom about her life, about her death. And that's when she told me something I never knew. My great-grandmother had worked at an amusement park when she was young. The very same amusement park where I had met Sarah. And she had died in an accident there, in the Hall of Mirrors. Apparently, there was a fire and she was trapped. The park shut down shortly after. My mom said that after my great-grandmother's death, people said the park was haunted, cursed, and that her spirit was trapped there. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Sarah. Who was she? How did she know about my great-grandmother? What did she want from me? I decided to do some research. I searched online for Sarah's name, but I couldn't find anything. No social media profiles, no online presence whatsoever. It was like she didn't exist. Then, I remembered something she had said to me at the park. I have so much to show you. I went back to the amusement park. I know, it was stupid. But I had to know. The park was even more dilapidated than before. The weeds had grown taller. The rust had spread further. It felt like it was decaying before my eyes. I walked to the Hall of Mirrors, my heart pounding in my chest. The door was open, creaking ominously in the wind. I stepped inside. The hall was empty. But then I saw something scrawled on one of the mirrors, in what looked like lipstick. "Thank you," it read. And then I understood. Sarah wasn't trying to scare me. She wasn't trying to harm me. She was trying to help my great-grandmother's spirit move on. By connecting me with her, by showing me the truth. She had freed her from the Hall of Mirrors. I don't know how Sarah knew, or how she was able to do what she did, but I'm grateful. I still think about her sometimes, about our strange encounter at the abandoned amusement park, and I wonder if she's out there, helping other lost souls find peace. Listen to this. You won't believe the crap that went down last month. I swear, dating apps are a portal to some seriously messed up stuff. I thought I was just swiping for a normal Friday night, maybe catch a movie or grab some pizza. But nah, life had other plans, the kind you see in horror movies, not real life. It all started with a Hinge match. Her name was Sarah, and her profile was different. Not bad different, just off. Her pics were all artsy, like black and white shots in graveyards, close-ups of decaying flowers, stuff that wouldn't scream "date me" to most dudes. But something about her eyes in those photos, this intense, almost desperate look, made me swipe right. I know. Red flag city. But curiosity killed the cat, right? We started chatting, and it was weird from the get-go. She asked questions about my childhood, stuff you don't usually get into before even meeting. Like, what was my biggest fear as a kid? Did I ever have any recurring nightmares? It felt like a therapy session mixed with a bad interview. Still, I was intrigued. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I was totally hooked. She had this way of making you feel like you were the only person in the world, even through text. We decided to meet at this old bookstore downtown, the kind with creaky floors and that musty smell that gets in your clothes. When I saw her, I almost turned around. She looked exactly like her pictures, but paler. like she hadn't seen the sun in years. She wore this long, black dress that swallowed her up, and her dark hair was pulled back so tight it looked painful. The date was strange. She spent most of the time talking about old books, obscure authors I'd never heard of, and this weird obsession she had with the building itself. Apparently, the bookstore used to be a funeral home back in the day. She kept saying she could feel the energy of the place, whatever that means. I tried to steer the conversation toward normal stuff, like movies or music, but she always brought it back to death, ghosts, and the history of the building. After that first date, things got really intense. She started texting me constantly, these long, rambling messages about her dreams and her feelings. She said she felt a connection with me, like we were meant to meet. I tried to slow things down, tell her I wasn't looking for anything serious, but she didn't seem to hear me. Then the gifts started. Little, creepy things. A dried flower pressed in a glass frame, a small, antique mirror that gave me the creeps, an old, leather-bound book written in some language I couldn't understand. Each gift came with a message about how it was a piece of her soul, a token of our connection. It was like she was trying to possess me, piece by piece. I started having nightmares, vivid, disturbing dreams where I was trapped in the bookstore, surrounded by coffins and the ghosts of the dead. Sarah was always there, her eyes glowing in the dark, beckoning me closer. I would wake up in a cold sweat, my heart pounding, feeling like I was being watched. I tried to break things off with her, but she wouldn't let me. She kept showing up at my apartment, leaving messages on my car, calling me at all hours of the night. She said we were destined to be together, that our souls were intertwined. One night, I woke up to a noise outside my window. I peeked through the blinds and saw her standing there, in the street, staring up at my apartment. She was holding a small, wooden box in her hands. I couldn't see what was inside, but I had a bad feeling about it. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next day, I decided I had to do something. I went to the bookstore, hoping to talk to her, to convince her that we couldn't be together. The place was empty, except for the old man behind the counter. I asked him if he knew Sarah. He looked at me with a strange expression. "Sarah," he said, "there hasn't been a Sarah working here in years. Are you sure you have the right place?" I described her to him, showed him a picture on my phone. He shook his head. "Never seen her," he said. "This building has been in my family for generations, and I can tell you, no one named Sarah has ever worked here." I felt a chill run down my spine. If she didn't work at the bookstore, then who was she? How did she know so much about the place? I went home and did some research. I searched for old newspaper articles, obituaries, anything that might give me a clue about Sarah's identity. And then I found it. An article about a young woman named Sarah who had died in a fire at the bookstore back in the 1920s. She had been trapped inside, and her body was never recovered. The article included a picture of her. It was the same Sarah I had been dating. I didn't know what to do. I was terrified. I started packing my bags, planning to leave town, to get as far away from her as possible. But then I heard a knock at the door. It was Sarah. She was holding the wooden box from the night before. She smiled at me, a sad, knowing smile. "I knew you'd find out," she said. "I've been waiting for you." She opened the box. Inside was a ring, an old, tarnished ring with a single black stone. "This belonged to my mother," she said. "It's a symbol of our eternal love. Put on." I hesitated. I knew something was wrong, terribly wrong, but I couldn't move. I was paralyzed with fear. She took my hand and slipped the ring on my finger. As soon as it touched my skin, I felt a jolt of energy surge through my body. My vision blurred, and I felt myself losing consciousness. When I woke up, I was back in the bookstore. It was dark and cold, and I was surrounded by coffins. Sarah was standing next to me, her eyes glowing in the dark. "Welcome home," she said. "We're together now. Forever." I looked down at my hand. The ring was still there. And then I noticed something else. My skin was pale, almost translucent. My heart wasn't beating. I was dead. Turns out, Sarah wasn't a ghost, not exactly. She was more like an energy, a presence that had been trapped in the bookstore for decades. She needed a body, a vessel to inhabit. And I being the dumbass who swiped right on her creepy profile, had given her one. The twist. The real horror wasn't that I was dead. It was that I wasn't really me anymore. Sarah was in control. She was using my body to lure other unsuspecting guys to the bookstore, to repeat the cycle, to find another vessel for her endless existence. So yeah, that's my dating app horror story. A word of advice? Be careful who you swipe right on. You never know what kind of darkness you might be inviting into your life. Or, death. Okay, so, I never thought I'd be that person, The one with the crazy online dating story that makes everyone at the party go silent. I always rolled my eyes at those tales, figuring people were just exaggerating for effect. But trust me, this is all 100% true, and thinking about it still makes the hairs on my arm stand up. It started with a Hinge match, obviously. Her name was Clara, and her profile was different. Not in a bad way, exactly, just intriguing. All her photos were artsy, black and white shots. One was a close-up of her eye. Another was her standing in a doorway, all blurred out like she was a ghost. Her bio was even weirder. Collector of forgotten things. Seeker of quiet moments. I usually swipe left on anything that screams, wannabe intellectual. But something about her profile hooked me. Maybe it was the mystery, or maybe I was just bored. Either way, I sent her a message. Forgotten things, huh? Like what? She replied almost immediately. Memories mostly. And secrets. I should have unmatched her right then and there, I swear. But my curiosity got the better of me. We started chatting, and she was surprisingly normal, in a quirky, artsy kind of way. We talked about movies, music, books, the usual stuff. But every now and then, she'd drop these little hints, these cryptic comments that made me wonder what she was really about. Like, one time I mentioned that I was moving into a new apartment, and she said, "Be careful. Walls remember everything." We finally decided to meet up. She suggested this old bookstore downtown, the kind with dusty shelves and the smell of old paper hanging heavy in the air. It was perfect for her vibe. When I saw her, I was surprised. She was way prettier than her photos suggested, with these huge, dark eyes and a smile that could melt glaciers. We spent hours browsing the shelves, talking about our favorite authors and obscure literary magazines. She even bought me a first edition of some old poetry book, which was a seriously smooth move. After that, we started seeing each other a lot. We went to art galleries, indie movie screenings, and even explored some abandoned buildings on the outskirts of town, which, in retrospect, was a huge red flag. I was totally falling for her. She was unlike anyone I'd ever met before, and I loved the way she challenged me to see the world in a different light. But then things started getting weird. It started small. I'd find things in my apartment that I didn't remember putting there. A dried flower on my desk, a random button on my nightstand, a small, tarnished key under my pillow. I chalked it up to absent-mindedness at first, but it kept happening. And then I started having these nightmares. Vivid, disturbing dreams about being trapped in a maze of hallways, with Claire's voice echoing in the distance, calling my name. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat, convinced that someone was watching me. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, and scanned the room. Nothing. But as I was about to lie back down, I noticed something strange on my bedroom wall. It was a shadow, but not just any shadow. It was the silhouette of a person, standing perfectly still, facing my bed. I froze, paralyzed with fear. The shadow stayed there for what felt like an eternity, then slowly faded away. I didn't tell Clara about the shadow. I didn't want her to think I was crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow connected to all the weirdness that was happening. I started paying closer attention to her, trying to figure out what she was hiding. One day, we were at her apartment, which was even creepier than I imagined. It was in this old Victorian house that looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1800s. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the furniture was all antique and slightly menacing. She had a collection of old dolls that honestly gave me the creeps. While she was in the kitchen making tea, I decided to do some snooping. I know, it was wrong, but I couldn't help myself. I started going through her bookshelves, hoping to find something that would explain her obsession with forgotten things. And that's when I found it. Tucked away on the top shelf, behind a stack of old books, was a leather-bound journal. The cover was blank, but when I opened it, I saw that it was filled with handwriting. Not just any handwriting, though. It was my handwriting. I started reading, and the blood drained from my face. The journal was filled with entries about my life, my thoughts, my dreams, things that I had never told anyone, not even Clara. It was like someone had been inside my head, recording every detail of my existence. I flipped through the pages, my heart pounding in my chest. And then I saw something that made my stomach drop. It was an entry about my childhood home, the house where I grew up. The entry described a secret hiding place in the attic, a place where I used to keep my most prized possessions, a place that only I knew about. I slammed the journal shut and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I was back in my own place, gasping for air. I didn't know what to think. Was Clara a stalker, a psychic, or something even worse? I didn't talk to her for days. I avoided her calls, ignored her texts. I was too afraid to confront her, afraid of what I might find out. But then, one night, she showed up at my door. She looked different than I'd ever seen her before. Her eyes were wild, her hair was a mess, and she was wearing this long, black dress that made her look like she was going to a funeral. "We need to talk," she said, her voice barely a whisper. I reluctantly let her in. She sat down on my couch, and for a moment, we just stared at each other in silence. Then, she took a deep breath and started talking. She told me that she wasn't who I thought she was, that she was part of a secret society, a group of people who believed that memories were the most powerful force in the universe. They believed that by collecting and preserving memories, they could control the past, present, and future. She told me that she had been watching me for years, studying me, learning everything about me. She said that she had been drawn to me because I had a rare gift, the ability to create incredibly vivid and detailed memories, memories that were valuable to her society. And then she told me the truth about the journal. She said that it wasn't just a collection of my memories. It was a vessel, a container for my soul. She said that by possessing the journal, she could control me, manipulate me, make me do anything she wanted. I didn't believe her at first. I thought she was crazy. But then she opened the journal and started reading aloud. She recited my deepest fears, my darkest secrets, my most embarrassing moments. And as she spoke, I felt myself changing. I felt my will weakening, my mind becoming clouded. I felt myself becoming a puppet, dancing to her tune. I tried to fight it, but it was no use. She had me in her power. She could do anything she wanted to me. But then, something unexpected happened. As she was reading, she stumbled over a word. It was a word that I had misspelled in the journal, a word that I had always struggled to pronounce. And in that moment, something clicked. I realized that the handwriting in the journal wasn't mine. It was hers. She had copied my memories, yes, but she had also made mistakes. Mistakes that I would never make. And that's when I understood. She wasn't controlling me. She was pretending to be me. She was trying to steal my identity, to erase me and take my place. I don't know where I found the strength, but I managed to break free from her spell. I grabbed the journal from her hands and ripped it to shreds. She screamed in rage, but it was too late. The spell was broken. She lunged at me, but I pushed her away. She stumbled backwards, tripped over a rug, and fell to the floor, hitting her head on the edge of the coffee table. She was out cold. I called the police, and they took her away. I later found out that she had done this before, to other people. She was a master manipulator, a con artist who preyed on vulnerable individuals. I'm still messed up about it. I moved out of that apartment, changed my number, and deleted all my social media. I'm trying to forget about Clara and everything that happened, but it's not easy. The weirdest thing? After the police took her away, they searched her apartment, and in her closet, they found a whole box of Hinge profiles she'd printed out. All of them were of me, going back years. Different photos, different bios, different names, but always me. It was like she was obsessed with creating different versions of me, waiting for the perfect moment to strike.